Welcome back, students. So, in continuation with the previous lecture, where we discussed about the purpose of engine and different types of engines, we'll be further classifying internal combustion engines. So, internal combustion engines, the combustion takes place, as I said earlier, it takes place inside the engine. So, based on the mechanism which is used to burn the fuel. So, here energy or useful work is obtained by burning fuel. So when fuel is burned, huge amount of energy is released. So that energy is being utilized to drive the crankshaft. So based on the mechanism of burning the fuel, the internal combustion engine can be classified into two broad categories. One is spark ignition engine and another one is compression ignition engine. So what type of ignition is used? So based on that, we are classifying into spark ignition and compression ignition. So a spark ignition engine or compression ignition engine, it works based on different strokes. So different strokes will be available. So as you see in this image, so there are different strokes available in a engine. So based on that, the engine may be classified into two-stroke engine as well as four-stroke engine. So compression ignition engine is predominantly a four-stroke engine. Spark ignition engine may be either two-stroke or four-stroke. So first we will see about a spark ignition engine. So as you see the image in your left to your left, so that is a spark ignition engine, and the image to your right is a compression ignition engine. So what's the major difference between these two engines is, as the name indicates, spark ignition engine has a spark plug, and a compression ignition engine has a fuel injector. So that's the major difference between these two engines. So what's the purpose of a spark plug and a fuel injector? We will see in detail. So this particular lecture, we may discuss about the spark ignition engine. So in a spark ignition engine, as I said earlier, there will be a spark plug. So the purpose of spark plug is to provide spark for ignition process. Whereas in a compression ignition engine, the ignition takes place by virtue of compression. So what type of fuel may be used in a spark ignition engine or compression ignition engine? Question arises. So we all know petrol is more volatile than diesel. So if you ask a common man, which fuel needs spark to ignite, petrol or diesel, you may say diesel, because the reason being petrol is readily volatile. If you keep it in outside atmosphere, it will evaporate rapidly. So based on that understanding, you may say spark is needed for petrol and diesel fuel, but the concept is different. Reason being volatility, that is evaporation or evaporating temperature of petrol may be low, but its ignition temperature is high when compared to diesel. So this is an important point. I will stress it again. Here we are igniting the fuel. So the temperature which is needed is ignition temperature. So that temperature is called as fire point, flash point, fire point. So those temperatures are needed for ignition. So that igniting temperature is higher for petrol compared to diesel. Hence, spark ignition is used in petrol because it has higher ignition temperature compared to diesel. Unlike diesel, if you compress it, diesel will burn. But petrol, if you compress it, it will not ignite on its own. So that temperature is called a self-ignition temperature. So self-ignition temperature for petrol is higher than diesel, and hence spark is needed in a petrol engine. You need to provide some external spark in order to burn the fuel in a burn petrol. Hence, spark plug is used in a petrol engine. So if you compare the alternative, petrol engine uses spark plug, whereas diesel engine can be used by compression ignition. So diesel can be compressed to ignite, but if you compress petrol, it will not ignite. You need an extra spark to ignite the engine. So that is regarding this spark ignition and compression ignition engine. So to give you a quick recap, in this lecture we discussed about two types of internal combustion engine. One is petrol and diesel, or in other words, spark ignition and compression ignition engine. So petrol is used in a spark ignition engine and diesel is used in a compression ignition engine because self-ignition temperature for petrol is higher than diesel. So thank you, students. That's all for today's lecture. We will meet in another lecture. Thank you.